We are on the third day of our summer school, whose main theme this year is on popular movements. Today, class struggles in rural and urban peripheries. These roundtables, there are 3 during the course of the week. They have always served the purpose of, aside from the panels where papers are presented, they serve the purpose of providing for some reflection on the issues, the broader issues that can guide the rest of the discussions during the week in the specific panels. So it gives context, it gives an orientation to these debates, especially this one on internationalism is a very dear issue to us and a very important aspect of our work and indeed of this theme on popular movements. We cannot separate popular movements from the question of internationalism. So my name is Paris Yaros. I will chair this session. We have with us, I'll just go down the list, Max, Ayo, Jemima, Pierre, Mamadou Goita, and here in Harare, Sandeep Chatra and Archana Prasad. We also have in the room 20 comrades who managed to make it to Harare this year. And we have many more watching us on live stream and in this Zoom session. So without further ado, just to reinforce that this is a very important session. We have had these debates over the years in the Agrarian South. We even had a very specific debate last year on what a new Bandung might look like, what the needs are today in terms of solidarity. This is perhaps a type of sequel to that. Let's get back to the issues and see if we can take them forward. So we will we'll start with Archana Prasad. Then we will go with Max. We will just rearrange a bit the order. Then Jemima, then Mamadou, and at the end, Sandeep. Okay? All right, so Archana, please.
Thank you, Paris. I'd like to, first of all, thank the Institute's team for organizing this physical summer school after 3 years. It's really been nice to meet everybody over here and discuss our concerns and our future, for the next few years. The title of this panel is Popular Movements and International Solidarity. Well, I choose to interpret the title and international solidarity as a promotion of the internationalist perspective on working class issues and the working class movement. I mean, everybody knows that there's a famous slogan or a famous saying within Karl Marx's writing that if capital is global, working class cannot be national. And therefore, I choose to address in my brief remarks the anti-imperialist history of the women's movement from an internationalist perspective. Now, when I'm talking about an internationalist perspective, I don't mean that we have to look at the problem of women's emancipation as a common problem manifesting itself in common trends in every region. For me, an internationalist perspective is not occasional, but it's a perspective where women's emancipation becomes an essential pillar of building a transition to socialism. this fundamental inequality within the capitalist and, of course, the pre-capitalist systems too has framed the class formation process in the world. And I choose to look at this, the long history of women's emancipation from a perspective of working class unity. In 1920, the firebrand Russian feminist, Alexandra Kollontai, socialist feminist, she basically said, on 8th March, we celebrate the International Working Women's Day. But 8th March is also the day of the February Revolution. So the importance of the International Women's Day and the concerns of working class women to the working class cannot be underestimated. And she was only following the path that Clara Zetkin had shown by pronouncing the International Working Women's Day, where she basically said, if you vote for women, you vote for united, strengthening the unity of the working class and a transition to socialism. So this is the first point that I would like to make. But associated with this is the problem of forging that unity. And it's not an easy path. We have to look at the problem of women's emancipation in this perspective, because the contradictions and the factors that divide the working class, whether it's race or patriarchy, keep remolding themselves according to the machinations of capital itself. So in this context, I would like to recall some of the early attempts to build international solidarity, which is a manifestation of internationalism within the women's movement. While reading for this panel, I came across some really interesting documents. And these documents were pertaining to the formation of the Women's International Democratic Federation. The Women's International Democratic Federation was a consortium of women's mass movements, which were left-leaning and had a decidedly anti-imperialist perspective. They distinguished themselves from bourgeois feminism in specific ways. Firstly, the agenda was influenced greatly by the Cold War. And some of the earliest documents I could find on this were in the 1930s, a precursor to the formation of the World Federation, which was the All-Asian Women's Meet in 1931. And I'm proud to say that many of the Indian communists were part of that meet too, which then turned into a 1949 meet in Beijing, where the precursors of the organization that I also belong to and in one sense represent, the All India Democratic Women's Association, that is the Women's Self-Defense Committee, was one of the organizers of that Beijing meet. That meet basically raised the class issues of working class women. And in that meet, the slogan for the unity between working class and women movement was made. And the World International Democratic the Women's International Democratic Federation, which actually had branches in Latin America. I don't know about how many African countries, when they did not have the time to investigate that, but certainly many South Asian countries were part of that. They met regularly in order to, even till 2012, where they distinguished themselves from the solidarity being manufactured in the United Nations amongst different NGOized women's groups. We are aware, if we come to the contemporary period, because there's not much time, I don't want to sort of take too much time on the history, but we are aware that there were 4 United Nations World Conferences on Women, starting with 1976 and ending in 1994 in Beijing. And the Beijing conference, and I will take some examples from India to elucidate that because I'm familiar with them. The Beijing conference had an alternative conference called the NGO Forum for Women's Emancipation in Hararu. And this forum was basically shifted away from Beijing, 1 hour out of Beijing, in order to avoid too much controversy. Yeah. Now, when this conference was announced, I know, for example, many national processes must have taken place in different countries, but in our country, the All India Democratic Women's Association brought out a document called Structural Adjustment or Structural Transformation ? And in this document, the organization questioned the platform for action, which was being proposed by the UN Assembly, with a focus on the structural adjustment program and on the actions of the imperialist powers on different regimes. Now, I don't want to get into too many details on this, but the Towards Beijing document had the signature of every major women's mass organization and even few NGOs on it, which went to Beijing. And when Hillary Clinton addressed the Beijing meeting, the NGO forum, and tried to hijack it, it was organizations like ours that basically got together a big chunk of the South and boycotted that meeting. She was forced to withdraw and the meeting carried on. But the net result of that solidarity action was that the UN Conference on Women in 1994 was forced to recognize structural adjustment as a problem. It had to introduce one whole section into its document on structural adjustment. And secondly, the other thing that happened is that, which was not adopted by the UN, these organizations asked for a monitoring committee on multinational organizations. Land reforms, monitoring committee on multinational companies, and the regulation of multinational companies and all basic services. Now, if you look at the demand charter carefully, these are not only women's demands. They are demands that should be taken up by any class struggle, working class movement. But the charter came from the understanding that women's emancipation cannot be disassociated from the larger class struggle of working class emancipation, albeit recognizing that certain special measures have to be taken in order to improve the political balance within existing working class organizations as well. So this struggle has been going on. Now coming, how much time do I have?
2 minutes.
Well, I wanted to give me 5. Well, coming to the contemporary period, now I feel that somehow in our solidarity actions, we have forgotten this history. And it has been actually pushed under the carpet in the scholarship as well. There are certain debates that one needs to take note. For example, when the US withdrew out of Afghanistan, there was a big debate in India on the role of the Taliban. Now, the Taliban at that moment was an anti-US force. Yeah, but we need to keep in mind that US imperialism created the Taliban also. So how do we basically counter the reactionary so-called anti-imperialism that emerges and has a negative impact on the life of women? This is an open question for the women's movement right now, and there's a whole lot of debate. I can give you one example. The last document that I found on the Women's International Democratic Federation was the joint document made by the Cuban Federation of Women and the WIDF to United Nations Human Rights Council. This was basically in the wake of the American attack on Iraq. Yeah, getting to the forefront the condition of the women and their sexual exploitation by the US imperialist forces. This is the last recorded document that I find on the website, but as I haven't done enough research on it, I'm saying the problem of, we've been talking about NGOization and all this, but can only be resolved, and the NGO solidarity can be brought onto an anti-imperialist platform only by understanding the context and the questions that the context and the questions have emerged in the long history of anti-imperialism of the women's movement. And that movement is driven by working class women. After all, as Kollontai pointed out, the March 8th revolution, the first event in that was the working class women's attack on the Tsar in St. Petersburg. So we should not forget the leadership that women have provided to the revolutionary movement. And we have to find ways of checking through international solidarity. We have to find ways of checking the reactionary tendencies within the anti-imperialist movement, which are, in my belief, the long-term manifestations of the penetration of imperialism itself. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Archana. Very illuminating. What a great way to start this session. We'll move straight to the next is Jamima Pierre. Please. No, sorry, it's sorry, we've changed. It's Max, right? Max, sorry.
So thank you, Archana. That was brilliant and very helpful for situating some of my comments. So it seems to me, following on what Archana has said, that this question of international solidarity and people's movements is one of the most fraught questions of our day. And it's fraught because it's producing enormous strategic confusion. And it seems to me this strategic confusion is not merely within the racist European, Euro-American left, but actually this strategic confusion is broader than that at this point. Of course, a huge portion of it is the typical confusion, which is produced by the overwhelming hegemony of Eurocentric perspectives. This aspect is, of course, the easiest to critique intellectually, although it's more difficult to defeat politically, because it has the support, directly or indirectly, of monopoly capital within the core and its cultural institutions and appendages in historical periphery, including, to talk about the Arab region, with a powerful role through the Khalij, the Arab Gulf states. This also extends, of course, to a very widespread imperialist-created civil society across the South. And this includes pervasive NGOization, pervasive Western Foundation funding, including through trade unions, and also pervasive production of Western media, or ideologically Western media, which now extends throughout the entire world and is, again, particularly, it seems to me, acute within the Arab region due to the role of the Arab Gulf states, the massive amount of capital they have at their disposal. And this has gone largely both unremarked and, I think, underknown or unknown. Right, and this, of course, extends to the university system, which is, of course, increasingly owned by the Arab Gulf states. Again, it cannot even, and it can hardly be discussed. Against this context, I think we can identify a few basic types of people's movements. In fact, without putting a positive ideological, positive normative marker on those people's movements within the modern period, within the contemporary period, within the post-Soviet, post-1990 period. So I want to have some clarity about the period itself, because I think it structures the type of movements we have, the types of discussions about solidarity we have, and what is or isn't possible. What's first significant is we're in a period where there are few, but not no, poles of material opposition to imperialism, and the poles that we have are not large. It's probably been, I'm thankful to Archana for bringing it up, but it seems to me that we don't discuss it enough that, for example, the destruction of Iraq and the imposition of defeat terms on the Palestinian national movement after the Intifada emerged immediately after the fall of the Soviet Union. Second central dynamic of this period, resistance to imperialism is often, especially in this region, in the Arab-Iranian region, is taking forms that are not linked to the historical heritage of Marxism and do not necessarily identify with the left. And of course, these dynamics are interlinked. The loss of a class-oriented anti-imperialism in some portions of the world is linked to the global post-Soviet conjuncture. Furthermore, amidst this period, we see a massive rise, a massive and escalating hegemony within both through the institutions I was mentioning, but which is now beginning to manifest in a kind of at the popular level, or at least amongst very large, well-educated, but ideologically disoriented middle classes of liberalism and regime change theories structured around calls for democratization. And this also includes a plastic and cynical deployment by imperialism of any number of contradictions, both amongst the people and within targeted states, related to gender, related to ecology, related to internal national minority questions. And these become transformations. They become weapons used against the people on the whole. We see increasingly that legitimate grievances are metabolized and deployed by imperialism to accelerate its own agenda. This is in part due to the objective weakness of the left, but it's furthermore linked to subjective and self-induced errors of leftist practice. Consider Lebanon, which saw a historic economic collapse and the acceleration of neoliberalism, not just before, but after the popular movement of 2019, 2020. The three types of movements we then see, I think, are one, regime change movements. I think these have a popular edge, and we shouldn't dismiss it, because if we dismiss it, we misunderstand how to react to them. These could be disorganized, liberal, controlled by Western-funded NGOs within US target states. Second, there are more complex movements that seize on discontent and have some widespread and legitimate claims and are likewise within US target states. And then there are popular movements against imperialism and monopoly capital. It is, I think, the easiest to point out the historical pattern of calls for solidarity with alleged popular movements in states targeted by imperialism. This phenomenon corresponds to and here I'm thinking very much particularly of what happened in the cases like Syria and Libya, right? Where imperial ideology took full hold of a legitimate discontent and used it to try to topple the state. This is accompanied by, of course, as is well known, by proxy wars. When it comes to a strategic orientation from the global left to these movements, it seems to me there's not enough clarity with respect to them. It seems to me that we do not see enough vocalization and opposition from a lot of the world to what was going on in terms of the war on Syria, for example. That the confusion was not merely within the Euro-American left, but extended elsewhere, right? I think a more complex case is contemporary Iran, where there are what seems to me entirely legitimate calls for reform of the state, particularly around the rights of women, but this is within a state that imperialism is targeting for its categorical immolation, for burning up the state itself, right? I think this presents a more complex case. A country like Iran has increasingly and mounting severe internal contradictions around class, gender, ecology, widespread social reproduction. It is also the primary support base for anti-imperialist movements in the Arab Iranian region, right? Both of these are true at the same time. Against this background, if these contradictions are not addressed in a pro-people way, we can state that, and we should state this clearly, the US and Israel will use them like cracks in a foundation to bring down the entire society. On the other hand, the forms of solidarity, which are now practiced on a wide scale, and this is not just a problem that's in the North, but I've also seen it in the South, right? Although they look like forms of solidarity that could have been practiced, like internationalist and feminist solidarity in the 70s and 80s. Really, they seem to me a mimicry of it because they do not rest on the strong enough forms of commitment to anti-imperialism or alternative poles of social organization that opened up an ideological space for auto-critique or for critique of states like Iran within the anti-imperialist left, right? And so they're overwhelmingly now, this form of solidarity is essentially coupled with calls for regime change, which it's not clear that this call has widespread resonance within Iranian society, right? But this, in fact, tends to overwhelm the discourse, and suddenly we're, unless you call it a popular revolution, you're identified as an apologist, right? So this has to be addressed, and also this, and again, this is not just a northern problem. This is also a southern problem. Finally, of course, there are popular movements, which probably we have the most clarity about in a space like this, that are anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist within the South. And of course, these types of movements, of course, deserve categorical support. And here is where the North is most deficient, right? These movements get absolutely the least attention, right? In fact, these movements get disproportionately very little attention compared to movements that can be alchemized or metabolized or deployed in the service of regime change itself. And this is because of the hegemony of regime change discourse within the Euro-American left, where in fact it's, I would say it's almost universal across the Euro-American intellectual left is support for regime change project. There is no longer space for an ideological alternative. And I think there's not enough clarity about that, it seems to me, in the South. And we need actually, and I live in Tunisia, but I'm from America, we need more clarity and critique about that from the South and be able to mount opposition to that, right? We're very isolated, in fact, those of us bringing this up. And we need more support on this because this discourse needs to be attacked and dismantled. Otherwise, it's very difficult to actually build a principled internationalism in the North itself. So those are some brief comments, and I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much. Sorry for the connection.
Thank you, Max. Thank you. Yes, indeed. You've laid out very well the tendencies that are being at the same time manipulated and weakening internally the resistance to imperialism. We will come back to this, and we would, of course, I will not abuse my role here. We will just go straight to Jemima. Please.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
It's very early for me in California,
Yes. Morning.
But good morning. Yes, afternoon, everyone. I'd like to talk. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to participate in this really important panel on international solidarity and popular movements. And my comments today are really about this one place in the region, in the Western Hemisphere, that really doesn't get the necessary attention. And so I want to talk about Haiti in particular as a way to think about popular movements, international solidarity, and also as a way to talk about the way neoliberalism and imperialism have impacted the region. And so most people know Haiti, of course, through especially whenever there are protests in Haiti or the ratcheted up Western media presentation about violence, especially since last summer, gang violence, the narrative of gang violence and the push for military invasion, foreign military invasion and occupation of Haiti that's been taken over since the late summer by the Western media. What this narrative, of course, belies the reality that these protests had been going on for years, especially in that summer, this past summer was for weeks, over the decision of the illegitimate installed Western government, Western puppet government in Haiti, to remove fuel subsidies for the people, pushed by the IMF, which would mean a catastrophic results for millions of Haitian people. Most of them are still in rural areas in the country, and which would also lead to and which also has led to the devaluation of the currency, the tripling of prices since the summer, and shortage of gas and so on and so forth. So the most recent talk until this day, there's been nonstop talk by the US, Canada in particular, and France to send a foreign military armed force supposedly to quell gang violence, but no conversation has been about the legitimate protests. One of the key things that has been lost in thinking about Haiti is how difficult international solidarity with Haiti has been, because there's the world's inclination to blame Haiti's economic and political situation solely on its international affairs, and also with the view that Haitian people cannot govern themselves. And this is a long-standing view that goes back to 219 years, that goes back for 219 years since Haiti was the first and only modern nation to get rid of, to defeat Napoleon's army and get rid of slavery and colonization and white supremacy. So this history has really shaped this exceptional history has really shaped the way that the world has dealt with this country. As recently as yesterday, you had the French ambassador to the UN basically saying that what Haiti needs, that 10 years ago, the UN Security Council had a secret meeting about how to take over Haiti under its tutelage and remove Haiti's sovereignty. And he boldly says this because people are bound to accept this. But one of the key things is thinking about Haiti has had more than 100 years of nonstop foreign intervention and occupation since the end of the revolution, but also beginning in 1915 when the US took over Haiti from 1915 to 1934, under the pretext that Haiti could not rule itself, but really to protect the US banks, Citibank that had taken over Haiti's central bank and was taking care of Haitian economic and policy. And I just want to read these quotes because you have the French ambassador to the UN say this about Haiti, but in 1915, you have the US secretary say, quote, The experience of Haiti and Liberia show that the African races are devoid of any capacity for political organization and possess an inherent tendency to revert to savagery and to cast aside the shackles of civilization, which are irksome to their physical nature, end quote. So I want to, if you combine what the French ambassador said yesterday and what this US Secretary said in 1915, you see the continuation of the views of the Haitian people. And so Haiti has really been the key laboratory, Western imperialism laboratory in the region. It has suffered all these occupations, and there's a current occupation that has been ongoing since 2004 when the US, France, and Canada led a coup d'etat against Haiti's first democratically elected government, which was then legitimized by a UN occupation force or multinational, multiracial occupation force that controlled Haiti from 2004 with thousands of military forces to 2007 when most of the force left, but there's a UN office that runs all the political things in Haiti right now, down to handpicking a prime minister when the president was assassinated a year and a half ago. It's interesting, people don't think about Haiti as an important site, and people always ask why Haiti. You know, since the early and part of one of the reasons is people don't understand Haiti is actually the major manufacturing hub in the Caribbean. And as early as the late 70s, it was Haiti and Hong Kong. The US government was saying that Haiti and Hong Kong would be, is it Hong Kong? I'm sorry, is Haiti and sorry, I have this, is it Hong Kong or Taiwan or Hong Kong, as it promotes a competition between Hong Kong and Haiti as a cheap market for products and labor. And so Haiti has the largest population in the Caribbean with 12 million people. It has always been a manufacturing hub. It's always been a competition with Asia, actually, for cheap labor for the region. And as the US ramps up its anti-China and its Indo-Pacific military, whereas Haiti becomes even more an attraction because it provides this labor. So there's been this need to, the interventions and occupations linked to the racism, of course, has been this need to keep to keep labor cheap for the region, for Canada in particular, which has companies in Haiti, and for the US. And this has been the ongoing thing. And the way that imperialism, and Haiti becomes then the laboratory for imperialist machinations. And so since the 90s, one of the things that happened after 1990s, after 80s, during the Cold War, rather than the Cold War strategy of propping up authoritarian regimes, policymakers sought to influence a broad array of civil society to create a more palatable democratic allies in the developing world. And one of the things, and most of you must know about the National Endowment for Democracy, this idea of funding so-called youth movements, young people to basically bring democracy. And Haiti was the site where they used this quite a bit through really target parties and coalitions, trade unions, using labor actually as a way to go against the legitimate government, to go against the government's the Aristide government's attempts to actually raise the Haitian minimum wage and bring social policies for social good. And so the overwhelming, what happened is that the US funded quite a number of these, and with the Haitian manufacturing, Haitian economy in the dumps, especially since in the 80s, the US government was dumping rice, killing Haitian manufacturing, Haitian agriculture through neoliberal policies. It was very easy to come in and basically fund some groups of people, young people, and lead them to push for regime change. And this is how labor has been used. And even though Haiti has a very strong labor movement, it has continuously been undermined since the early 90s through the National Endowment for Democracy, through funding, and through the the international NGOs, as well as labor movements that have flown into Haiti, including the AFL-CIO, to support right-wing US-funded labor movements against the actual people, grassroots labor movements underground. And so it's important then to think about what international solidarity means when we're talking about a place like Haiti, where people can't believe that there's actually a grassroots anti-imperialist labor movement. And instead, people always focus on this idea that these groups of violent Black people can't control themselves because of the wave of the 200 years of occupation and representation of the country. And so I think one of the things that we've had, I work with a group in the US called the Black Alliance for Peace, which focuses on the Western region, anti-imperialism. It's always been very difficult to get people to actually understand how key Haiti is to the region, to US imperialism, to neoliberalism, to putting down labor, and to experimenting new ways of of dealing with anti-imperialism and labor protests by absorbing protests and creating this bourgeois, a bourgeois opposition. And so until we actually see Haiti, what's interesting also for the region, and I'm going to stop here, is it's easy to give support to places like Cuba, places like Venezuela, but it's always been very difficult to deal with Haiti. And we have to understand why that is. And until we actually focus on how significant Haiti is in the region, and we cannot actually have international solidarity if we don't understand its importance, and if we don't see its processes as linked to all these other processes throughout the world. And its protests as legitimate protests of human beings looking to be free. So I'll stop there for the conversation.
Thank you, Jemima. Thank you for this. Of course, there's the other, the associated tragedy to this is how the Latin American states were also mobilized. And in fact, the multinational force was commanded by Brazil.
By Brazil, yes. Yeah. And Mexico is in the lead for this new push for a foreign military force to Haiti. So it's Mexico and the US pushing for this. So we really have to think about, we cannot have international solidarity if these so-called leftist leaders also participate in putting down Haitian sovereignty.
Thank you, Jemima. Thanks so much. We go next to Mamadou, please.
Thank you, Paris. Thank you all. It's really a very big pleasure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really a very big pleasure to be with all of you, even though I couldn't join you in Harare. I can imagine where you are sitting and what things are happening. So happy to discuss with you. I'm not in town, actually in Bamako, but it's really a good opportunity to exchange with everybody here. A lot has been said on the political background of popular movement, but also international solidarity. I will try just to contextualize it in the case of West Africa, particularly taking into as an entry point my country in Mali. What is the manifestation of this international solidarity side, and also how popular movement that are actually on move are operating. But before going in that perspective, I just want to highlight the fact that if you look at what Smelzer said, that popular movement working toward two key points, two entry points, may be completely different in terms of the way they are operating. One, the ones that are operating toward norms related to what is the different partial change that we can make actually. This is the most popular side part of the most numerous side of the popular movement that we have actually in the world. Just trying to see what kind of minor change we can make in the institutions, confronting what the state is doing, confronting what is going on the with the international community that we have been talking a lot about here, and how operationally we can just try to modify and have access to policies and to some spaces to operate. The second category of popular movement that is also described by author like Smeller is the one that are working toward values. Working toward values, meaning that it's looking for a deep social change in what is happening and how to operate. It's not just bringing people together, different kind of stakeholders, what we call them, different actors, different kind of constituencies of the society all together. It's not about the temporality of the issues, but the way that we are trying to have these deep changes in the society. So actually, can we talk about popular movement in the case of Africa or not? That is a big question. If you look at these two ways of dealing with the issue on norms related to political, social, economic, and the like that we have been talking about, and the labor forces that are within the kind of class debate that is within this power relation between different stakeholders, and looking at the deep change in the society. If I want to apply that, I totally agree with the categorization that Max has been doing. This is very helpful just to understand the different kind of popular movement that exists. Actually, I totally shared that perspective of this categorization. I want to apply that to what is happening actually in particularly in West Africa, historically speaking. In the 1960s, this is the period when most of the countries have been independent. Most of the countries in West Africa were socialist regimes with a strong relationship with some of the popular movement that exists, anti-colonization movement that was built. And then online of that, this movement were addressing key issues, how to reframe the colonial way of looking at production system, looking at the way that accumulation and redistribution was done within the society, and how it can be reflected in the new change that we had with the independence period. But it has been really a kind of dissolution for most of this movement, the anti-imperialistic movement that we created to fight against colonialism, because the system that colonialists have been bringing in the continent, many in most of the West African countries, they have been resumed with new regimes. Under even those under socialist regime were just resuming the colonial trade model related to that. So they have been disconnecting the political trend that was going on with the way that the society was operating before colonialist period, just after slavery in between, and before the colonial period. So most of that has been very critical to the changes that we had. The economic power relations that have been building continue just to try politically to be open to changing the power relations between the dominant classes and those who were oppressed during all that more than 1,100 years period, and what was just trying to be the model that can be linked to that, the model, economic, social, and political model that should be matched with this kind of movement. So emphasizing on commercial trade issues like cotton, like peanut, like coffee and cocoa in West Africa has been creating a new trend of accumulation and slowly just creating the gaps between different classes instead of just trying to have this transformation, this systematic transformation of the values. We have been working on norms. So this is very important. And then came some period in some of the West African countries in the 1968 to 1973, we had a severe drought that had been creating, showing us that this model that has been creating is more harmful to the transformation that most of the movement, the anti-colonialism movement that were operating and trying to create these baselines of just achieving the transformation that was going on before. So it has been very harmful to the societies, looking at the fact that this drought has just shown us that there is a big difference between what was expectations just after independence and what was going on with a new model of colonial system that was occurring in the country. So it brought a new ways of organizing, mainly in the peasant community, to face this new class that was emerging slowly and more oppressive than what was happening during the colonial period. And then the failure of the model just has brought to most of the movement just to reorganize in other ways, instead of looking at the norms that were operating, they're trying to look at the values. So this is the first generation of movement that emerged in the 70s, looking at back, what are some of the values that were necessary to be introduced to the fight that they were doing. So some peasant movement came at that period. But unfortunately, because the system was too binding and was too strong just to make this kind of change, and that came a period of structural adjustment period in the 80s. So when people were trying to define the way of fighting against the system, so came that period where many of the countries were so indebted because of the model that had been created in the 60s, that finally they enter in the adjustment program and creating again more gaps between different classes in the system, because all the liberalization of prices that have been happening, the kind of internalization of the models that have been operating, and most of the Green Revolution model that also came to Africa, and they said that it bypassed it because of some reason that I won't come back again. So we had this model that was not matching with the kind of social movement that was created. So the first movement, the first generation of social movement around mainly the farming system, tried to reorganize in other ways. And we had the second generation of farmers organization that came out with a nationalistic way of looking at what can be a movement and how the system are different, and people have to address their own system instead of just addressing at the regional level. And when they realized finally that the neoliberal policies that were occurring in this part of the continent were very problematic, so finally people decided just to move toward a kind of reorganization of popular movement to make them more regional, and then from national organizations to regional ones, with ROPA, for instance, that have been the first one to be created, and then moving also to other regions in Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, but also beyond that. And I will come back to that. But the problem is that this kind of organization were addressing mainly sectorial issues instead of just addressing the values that led us to the transformation and the social change that was needed. So it was about norms related to the model that we defended, not mainly the agrarian norms, but also some of the policy issues related to that. More than that, than addressing the values that were behind. So this led us also to what Mali is facing actually. And finally, because of the way of exploiting resources, mainly mineral resources, that colonialist countries became more internationalized, instead of, for instance, the case of Mali having only France in front, just addressing this model, it became an international way by corporations coming in and then depriving the country for the resources. That created a kind of frustration. So movement trying to address this issue have been completely tied up and couldn't move, couldn't use that value perspective approach of addressing this injustice that was occurring in the country, but addressing only the norms, how to find the space to debate and the space to be involved in policy processes, and then to have some of the institutional opening. And this happened, but finally we end up with what is Mali is facing actually, a completely militarization of international solidarity. And then finally, the problem is in Mali is not an issue of jihadists of that. It started with what happened in Libya, and then it was an opportunity for imperialist country to have access to resources that are concentrated mainly in the northern part of Mali, part of Niger, because we all know that Niger with uranium, Mali with gold, but also lithium and the like in this part, and oil, has been very instrumental, just trying to get an entry point, creating first a rebellion, supporting this rebellion just to say, we want to give you this space with some of the Tuareg communities, not all, but some of the tribes in that part of the country, and creating then what is called the militarization of the imperialistic view approach on this region of Africa. So finally, we end up with having 15,000 soldiers in our lands for international solidarity, to have 4 military bases in Niger, and for the first time, Germany and Italy have military bases in Niger. For these two are mainly for anti-migration perspective on the name of solidarity to fight against terrorism. So we had this in Niger at the door of Sahel countries. So with a view on Libya, but also Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger itself. And we have the US drone base and a very strong French military base in Niger on the name of solidarity, international solidarity. So this is the kind of thing that we are facing actually. But all is about the resources, about the gap that has been created between classes that brought some of the women to get involved, and how to start just working on them. So they have been creating things artificially, and then finally we get to that. So if you look at that trend, we were going further, we can
Mamadou, can you conclude, Mamadou?
Yeah, I will conclude now and saying that there is a new form of international solidarity that is a very violent one, first, very violent, materialized by all these military issues that I've been saying. Secondly, that the instruments that are used for this international solidarity need to be questioned. This is the project, call of proposals and like. So hijacking all the fight that social movements are doing under project financing, taking time on administrative issues, focusing on norms instead of just focusing on values, and then creating all this kind of artificiality of a social movement that we have actually in this continent. So it's very important to address that issue, and linking it to the theoretical background will just allow us to say that it's useful actually to rethink about the way that social movements are operating in different parts of our continent. I'm talking about Africa. So I will stop here, then hoping I've been a bit longer than usual, but I hope that questions and answers will allow us to go further in the case of West Africa, particularly in the Sahel countries.
Thank you, Mamadou. Thank you so much. The recurring theme in these your presentations is the increasing militarization, yeah, and here in the Americas, in the Middle East, in the Sahel. Yes, indeed. So please, Sandeep, it's yours.
Thanks, Professor Paris, and thank you to SMIAS for I follow Archana in convening this physical space after 3 years. It's wonderful to be here. We missed several people, and I hope in the coming year we can see a lot more people here rather than virtually. But nevertheless, it's wonderful to be here and be joined in this panel, this wonderful panel. The last but not the least, I will today reflect basically on 2 concrete, current and ongoing struggles, instances of popular mobilizations and assertions, and the imageries that are arising with implications to international solidarity. Both these movements, or both these protests and assertions are rooted in India with reflections elsewhere. The first of those that I will speak about in the brief time that I have, I'm going to read it to be quick, is the farmers' protest and the massive sustained mobilization which came to be developed over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, which came to be developed as the what would be called collective farmers front. We call it in Hindi the Sanyukt Kisan Morcha. So that's one. Second, I'll be reflecting somewhat, taking from a little bit from what Max was saying, the assertions of young women, particularly young urban women, and the resistance and mobilization in India. And as you've seen, Max was referring to Iran on the freedom of choice and agency as exemplified by the hijab protests. They have different renderings in both those situations. Arguably, the social basis for both these are different, and so is the form and size. But these instances among several others throw up wider possibilities on questions of international solidarity, as both these mobilizations have been subject to widespread international fraternity, as Marx called it earlier, and later solidarity. So that's how I'm going to frame it. Now, let me take the examples in turn. Firstly, on the farmers' movement. The farmers' movement started off as protests against the 3 anti-farmer laws, which was passed by the BJP government. These are anti-people laws, they are pro-corporate laws. These laws were meant to liberalize the agrarian sector, and these laws were meant to, sort of, in that there is an anti-capitalist rendering, if I may call it, for the farmers' movement. These laws essentially wanted to take away the state support in terms of procurement, in terms of minimum support prices to what farmers produce. They wanted to take away and increasingly privatized services, open it up to markets, and also, sort of the whole question of electricity, to privatize electricity, which would have met further input costs. The farmers' protest and struggle presents a saga of, it has unraveled over the last 2 years, temporarily interrupted, but not finished, because of late, I think the Sanyukt Kisan Morcha is again saying it'll go on strike. The farmer struggle protests present a saga of unified farmer struggle, as it continued dharna over a year, or a little more than a year actually, with hundreds of thousands of farmers, mostly from North India, but joined by all over, coming together into 1 million strong, 1 million strong formation, 1 million strong assertion. And this was very evident in the Mahapanchayat, or the larger collective that happened in 2021, and the national strikes, the 3 national strikes, which happened over these years. It is widely held that these protests were the largest and the longest in India's independent history, which basically is a massive imagery that they created. 700 farmers were martyred just very quickly. Thousands braved hardships, the cold, but also hunger at times, but also state violence, huge amount of state violence. And over 500 farmers organizations joined these. So it became a total national farmers front, or formation, or platform, as we may call it. Now, there are a few distinctive features that throw up some reflections for us here. Firstly, this kind of assertion brought together different farmers organizations, and led to the formation of the national platform, the Sanyukt Kisan Morcha. Peasants coming together not just from northern India, but it generally galvanized momentum of peasantry everywhere, in every single state, in every single kind of peasant formations. What it also is typified by or distinctive by is the support of trade unions. In fact, right at the very beginning, in terms of worker-peasant question, right at the very beginning, the joint platform of central trade unions had also joined it, and had also given a solidarity call. In fact, the All India Working People Strike in November of 2020 was in solidarity and together with the farmers' sort of movement. The protests were held very peacefully, in face of immense state violence, which was all over, you could see, against defamation, against attempts to fragmentation. And the fact is that these laws were passed very quickly during COVID time, just around the first wave of COVID, when there were lockdowns, thinking that there would be, the state had thought that there would be no resistances. But the resistance continued through the first phase, but also the disastrous second phase of COVID, or the second wave of COVID. These protests were totally peaceful, democratic, and I would add secular in nature. Of course, one can question whether several other agendas which peasantry has were adequately surfaced. But the fact remains that farmers' mobilizations, farmers' protests did introduce the other issues, the contradictions that there are of caste, of gender, of landlessness. One can argue that they were not at the forefront, because the instance in this case was more inspired, or let's say in challenge to the farm laws that were being changed. Now, I want to say that the farmers' movement in India brings some critical discussions, and in continuation with what has been said, to the fore for us. First of all, the images, sounds, and hopeful advances produced here as part of this massive, humongous mobilizations have become a part of common resistance imagery of the working classes and movements, certainly in India. But I have a sense that it had a lot of international resonance and solidarity, not only inspiring solidarity, but also action. Much like the protest on Shaheen Bagh, I'll come to that in a bit, earlier by Muslim women, a protest and a dharna which lasted 6 months in New Delhi had also inspired. Those Shaheen Bagh protests were around the amendment of Citizenship Act, which essentially was an attempt to delegitimize the Muslim community in India. Now, secondly, what I want to say is, now these protests, to me at least, are reminiscent of the emergence of workers' internationalism, the second half of 20th century and thereafter. And Archana touched on it, the International Workers Association, the First International, and beyond it. And these have found, which had also found expressions in the communist and socialist parties of that time. The question is, where is it at this time now? In its expression in the communist parties as in India, and its manifestations of inspiring resistance politics and international solidarity and support, can it find home in the possibility of Working People's International? So can the assertions of farmers in India, can the several such assertions of working people, as in Iran in 2018, and several others, indigenous people's resistance, do they find the home in the possibility of a Working People's International at this stage, which has feminist values? I think this is a question mark a lot of people are debating. Secondly, and finally, how can it open up new frontiers of struggle within these sort of assertions? The frontiers around the climate impact, the frontiers around the climate loss and damage, the question of indigeneity itself and the indigenous people's dispossessions, the feminist assertions that are going on. So these are some things that I would like to highlight on the farmers' question. The second example that comes from India is on the anti-hijab protests in India over the last year, over the last several months. A quick recap: a school in Karnataka refused girls entry into schools on the pretext that they were wearing hijab. And now, this is constitutionally allowed in India, freedom of speech, but also freedom of how you want to dress, of how you want to be, is constitutionally mandated, and several high courts before, in different state courts, Kerala and in Tamil Nadu, have upheld this right of girls and young women to be as they wish to be within the articles of the Constitution. The freedom of speech, the freedom of dress and choice. The besieged girls from Muslim community, in this instance, Muslim community is highly besieged by the fascist inclination, the political religious inclinations of our state, resisted and and held their ground up till now of autonomy, of freedom of choice, leading up to small but powerful protests and litigations. These protests were largely led by the Muslim community, the girls from within the Muslim community. Of course, others joined in solidarity, but they largely headed up. While litigations, and there are several litigations which are pending, and litigations are also pending in the Supreme Court. We don't know where the constitutional bench, which has been constituted for the purpose, goes. But these protests have certainly galvanized, in face of counter mobilizations, some degrees of what I would call progressive solidarity, both nationally and internationally, by the several students' unions, by the several progressive formations, by AIDWA, for instance, All India Association of Democratic Women, and others that Archana was referring to. Elsewhere in Iran, as we know, and Max was referring to it, Mahsa Amini's death sparked off massive uprisings against the theocratic state and its patriarchal impositions on women. It is noted that such an uprising against the theocratic chauvinist nationalist state, I would call it, which has used decolonization to its sort of ridden the wave of decolonization to its regressive sort of politics, comes after a massive working class strike and protest on bread, on jobs in Iran in 2018. Several have since been hanged, as we know, and what we see is the unraveling of a state-sponsored terror. In both these instances, in Iran and in India, around the hijab, there have been huge solidarity, particularly expressed by feminist movements, particularly expressed by trade unions, the progressive trade unions, the Women's International Democratic Federation, for instance. And in both these instances, the question of state violence, the question of fascist and theocratic inclinations, in both these cases, are being challenged. Such a peaceful situation, also we noticed at the time, such a peaceful protest, we also noticed at the time of Shaheen Bagh protests, which I mentioned were around the changes in the Citizenship Amendment Act. Now, the question is, will these kind of assertions and mobilizations, with the solidarity that they have, lead to a political project for emancipation of women, or are they somewhere separate, or sort of said fragmented assertions or vertically fragmented assertions? Secondly, what I want to sort of also bring it, that are these imageries and imaginations, the question is there a political instrument available to women which places the agency, which places these imageries at the forefront of the politics, at the forefront of the political project, in a rising feminist solidarity? One can talk of popular politics, one can talk of political parties, but is there at this conjuncture need to reflect on a different set of politics with reference to emancipation of women, given what has been the case in history? So I'd like to stop here. These are some thoughts that I had in reflecting on these struggles. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. Well, we have a wealth of, first of all, experience from our contributors, our speakers, our comrades on this panel, and a wealth of dilemmas to ponder. As I said from the beginning, we've been promoting this exchange of ideas for some time, a long time, in fact, and we have becoming more focused now on facilitating this exchange of ideas in various contexts, so that views can be aired, so that we can become more aware of what the contradictions and dilemmas are around the world, and what possibilities there are for what Samir Amin had called a international of working peoples. We are all, at least on this side, the disciples of Samir Amin, and we certainly share in this ideal. We will open it up. Let me just see if our participants here have any questions on the chat, but I will, we have our participants inside the room here in Harare. So please, any comments? We can also have a final round. We're supposedly having, we're towards the end. There's 10 minutes to go, but we can extend by another 10 minutes so we can have 10-15 minutes so that we can have some further debate. So any questions? Freedom, is there anyone online that is asking? Yeah, there's nothing. Okay. Please, Praveen, I think you would have to come here.
Yeah, I'll come there just to say hello to
Yes, yes.
all the listening comrades for India. Yes.
Pravinja.
No. I just for just connecting with them. So yes, Mamadou, your paper is still awaited for last 3 years now. Can you hear? The one that you and our other colleague from France, huh? So
No, from Bordeaux, we sent this to you. We didn't get a feedback. It was even asked me 2 weeks ago.
No.
Okay.
2 weeks ago.
Okay.
No, 2 weeks ago, he was asking me before the event when I asked him if he's going or not.
All right.
Okay, all right. Okay, no, I mean, I sort of don't have any specific question, but let me first of all congratulate all of you for extremely, in a very compressed time, set of very, very valuable inputs, right? Now, if time permits, what I would want all of us to reflect, and you as panelists, a little more on is precisely what I consider the most difficult question pertaining to international solidarity and so on, which is the necessary structural kind of prerequisites, which can make or mar these prospects of solidarity, etc. Right? In that sense, I mean, it's not a kind of a binary that I'm trying to create. What I'm suggesting is there has to be a lot of focus on, let's say, the current economic juncture, the way it has been shaped, the way it is kind of continuously being pushed in certain directions. And if you want to flag some of those issues in this extremely important interconnection, right? We could have had a little more conversation on that. So, if you give them some time, so hopefully it would be good to hear from all of you, because we are all kind of, in a sense, groping in the dark, sort of, what kind of very sharp thoughts can come up in our conversations in terms of those interlinkages. Thanks.
Thank you, Praveen. Yes, any other questions, comments? Yes. Well, I will give it back to you all, but let's just make a couple of comments on my own so that we can move towards the conclusion. I think what Praveen is saying, so I will just interject here. We are indeed in a very unique historical period. It is a permanent crisis. We had this debate on Monday. It is a permanent crisis of capitalism. which is entering in the phase of its terminal decay. Yeah, this decay can last long, and it is producing certain new and old phenomenon. One is not only the neo-colonial order, which established itself after decolonization, general decolonization. This itself, the neo-colonial order, is in a very late phase now, yeah, where neoliberalism has devoured, yeah, societies, devoured social formations which were already vulnerable, and created populations which have no future. Yeah, if we take seriously the contradiction, the basic social contradiction of capitalism, which is to create reserves, burgeoning reserves, labor reserves, on a continuous basis. We are now in the 21st century in a situation where the labor reserves are growing and growing, and in the South, there's no future unless a radical change of direction takes place, so that the peoples of the South can exercise sovereignty and organize political systems and economic planning to effect a transition. One aspect of this late phase of neocolonialism is the fascist phenomenon. Popular forces in the South now, in several cases in India and Brazil, have been mobilized. Yeah, it was said by Max and in fact everyone, Jemima, how there's a popular a social element that gets mobilized for reactionary means. This is becoming ever more systematic. Yeah, and there is and it is, of course, in every case you will find particularities, but what brings it all together is a system which creates these labor reserves on a permanent and growing basis. The beyond the fascist phenomenon, we have a decay, a regression into modern semi-colonial situations, and these are, we have had this is a serial phenomenon. The whole Sahel is succumbing to it has Mamadou has pointed out the case of Niger, Mali, but if you go across Somalia, and the expansion of military bases anyway, is putting all these countries on the brink of a semi-colonial rule, yeah, where you have occupation forces occupying territories with personnel coming in and out with no control over what normal sovereignty, even the basic sovereignty, controls. This applies to Haiti. Yeah, Haiti has been occupied and reoccupied and reoccupied, and now it's on the brink of another invasion. And of course, the Middle East itself is in the western part of Asia, from Afghanistan to Iraq to Syria, have all succumbed. Yeah. So this is the state of affairs, which we actually collectively today we alluded to and illuminated. Yeah, its dilemmas and contradictions. There's also on the other hand the rise of China and the role it's playing in subverting the imperialist structures. We talked about this on Monday. So that is the case, the situation in a more systemic sense that that we need to keep our eyes on as well. I mean, these invasions are part of a process which is part of the system in this decaying terminal crisis. Yes, there is a question here. Sorry, where was it now?
Go to Q&A.
Q&A.
Open it.
Okay. Thank you. Nancy. Nancy is here. And thank you for the presentations. Could Jemima please elaborate further on the lack of global South solidarity for Haiti? Are the differences between Anglo-Francophone extending solidarity? And thank you. I hope Agrarian South Network will do more on the Haiti question this year. Fantastic. Thank you, Nancy. So I think the best, given our time constraints, the best way is to hand it back to you. And Jemima, you can also refer to this question. So let's just go back down the same order. No, you want to? Oh, come on, Archana, please. Archana will start, and please take. We are 5, so 3 minutes each to wrap it up. Thank you. And I'm sorry. Yes.
You say constructional issues.
No, just you can respond any way you want, but we don't have much time left, so let's try to bring it to a close.
Okay, so I think the issue that was raised by Praveen about the structural conditions for solidarity, I mean, it's obviously a very important issue that on which several debates are taking place. But I obviously agree with the fact that actually delinking is one of the most important structural issues that is required to build anti-imperial solidarity. Because if you look at even the women's movement today, Beijing plus 20, Beijing plus 15 before that, you see what are the demands? The demands are a common school system, food security, land reforms, control of multinationals and commodification of women, health for all. As I said earlier, which I could not elaborate, they are basic services. And basic services which should be provided by the state. Now, if you look at the UN documents, they're basically trying to tinker with the system. They're not engaging with the system. Whereas what we want is an engagement with the system, which is why I also said that the emancipation of women is not possible without the emancipation of the working class, and the emancipation of the working class is not possible without the emancipation of the women, because the entire terminal crisis is what we've been saying, but maybe one should delve into it more, is the crisis of the very survival of the working class, which cannot happen if the current system keeps reproducing itself and exploiting people more. So obviously, I mean, I agree with the broad argument that people have been making and we've been all making, that delinking and the accountability of the national sovereign state towards its people is a necessary structural condition. But having said that, I just also want to just add one small thing to what Sandeep said on the CA and all. I can just tell you from my experience of organizing that I think the solidarity is not that apparent also, because we did try to organize throughout the country on some of these issues of the Muslim women. And actually, the polarization has become so ingrained, and that polarization is actually a manifestation of the fundamentalism and the corporate relation, the marriage between corporate capitalism and fundamentalism, which you see in many southern countries today. Yeah. So we found that actually non-Muslim women coming out were either the converted women already, yeah, or people who are generally part of the broader democratic movement. It was very tough to get out the ordinary woman on CA, even though these citizenship laws impact all women's citizenship, as you can see in Northeast India, in a fundamental way. So I think what we are dealing with is a really vexed issue where the polarization is actually backed by globalized and internationalized corporate capital, which you call the terminal crisis of monopoly capitalism. The only way is to fight its de-linking. Therefore, you cannot have a separate feminist perspective from this. This is what I believe in. The moment you start to separate the feminist perspective, you get into the problems of the reform of the system rather than the transformation of the system, which is the slogan which we had given, not structural adjustment, but structural transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Archana. Actually, I was told that I'm exaggerating on the time, so we can take 5 minutes each, as Archana already took anyway. So we have, we can go for another 20 minutes here. So the next, Max, please, Max.
Thank you. So I don't know if I'll go for 5 minutes, but
yes.
So I think what's critical, in fact, in discussing solidarity in a context where we have pervasive recolonization, semi-colonization, state fragmentation, state shattering in the Sahel, in the Arab-Iranian region, in Haiti, Afghanistan, elsewhere, right? This is pervasive. This is far beyond neocolonialism. Is that, first of all, solidarity has to unroll, be manifest amidst an active defense of the political sovereignty regime that was achieved in part by the decolonization and national liberation movements, and that the US and the European regimes are trying to roll back actively. They're trying to roll it back materially, and they're also trying to roll it back ideologically, right? That needs active, and of course, as Jemima has pointed out, there's complicity with that, in fact, within social democratic, complicated social democratic states within the periphery itself, right? This needs to be actively resisted. Both, of course, we need organizational forums and spaces that can bring people together and draw strength from one another, that can set an agenda on a world scale and also set an agenda also for the northern people living in the north, right? To set an agenda so that people have a pole to which to be accountable. I mean, this is what Paris was writing about in a new Bendong. We need organizational forums where people can come together and arrive at common lines. And this is absolutely critical. This also needs to take place. I wish we had a participant from Algeria to talk about the Hirak, which I'm not really qualified to talk about. But one of their refrains has been a defense of the state, right? Not necessarily defense of the government at all, but a defense of the state against imperialism, right? This has been absolutely critical because what imperialism is doing is collapsing the state itself, right? This is a huge problem. And once it collapses the state, it's very hard to reconstitute it, right? And it's failed to do that in Syria. Although what it's doing with economic sanctions is now getting very close to it. I mean, this brings me to the third point, which I actually I want to respond to some of what Sandeep said. I mean, I do not consider it either helpful or accurate to be calling the Iranian government, which has huge internal contradictions, a fascist state. Fascist states do not support national liberation movements in their surrounding region. Iran is the major logistical backbone for the national liberation movements in Yemen, in Palestine, the national sovereigntist movement in Lebanon, right? The Syrian state would not exist if not for the Iranian state, which would be a massive crisis of social reproduction. Neo-fascist fascist states, or if we accept the term sub-fascist states, historically do the opposite, right? So this is not a question of downplaying contradictions that are internal to Iran. This is a question of arriving at ideological agreement about the nature of those contradictions and how to address them while balancing both the positive external role and often negative internal contradictions, and also having a line, let us say, a line that reflects a balance of those issues and orients how we then orient to popular movements or complicated and internally fractured movements within those states. For example, I mean, it's not a peaceful movement in Iran. Peaceful or democratic and mass-based popular movements in most states in the world system, including in the US, do not run around murdering state security officers in general, which has happened at a very large pace in Iran. It was a prelude to the regime change operations in Libya and Syria. And insofar as we don't mention that in internationalist, pro-sovereign, national liberation-oriented spaces like this, we're going to have trouble arriving at clarity about what the line needs to be and how to defend that line in our political work going forward. So I think these are very important issues to keep in mind as we struggle through. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Thank you very much. That's Jemima, please.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it and the presentations. I wanted to pick up on Max's point that, you know, and I think Paris, you're right in terms of this moment we are, this late neocolonialism, and you know, there's you said semi-colonialism, but I actually think, you know, we have outright colonialism at this point, and this is why I think one of the problem with looking at Haiti is the inability to see Haiti as unexceptional. And so then we don't see, for example, Haiti is the perfect example of the complete collapse of the state. There is no state. We have no elected leaders in Haiti. From 7,000 at the beginning of the coup d'etat that the US, France, and Canada initiated in Haiti to 2023, there is no elected government. There is a core group of multinational, of many nations, including Brazil, running Haiti that makes decisions. That to me is complete colonialism. And if we don't understand how it is that was allowed to happen from 2004 to 2023, with help from the global South, with, you know, a military force, which actually makes me think about Mamadou's point about international solidarity as could be a violent phenomenon, where you have a coup d'etat, a military occupation led by people from the global South, from Nepal, which, you know, Senegal, Ghana, all over Latin America. These are the soldiers, you know, occupying Haiti on behalf of the US. Then which leads me to these, in this moment, these so-called international organizations, the ideological war of the UN as this democratic global, you know, representative institution, because a lot of these people who were part of the occupation of Haiti thought that they were in solidarity with Haiti. I think a lot of people thought they were helping Haiti. The global NGOs, all the young people from the African continent, from Latin America who were in Haiti, they thought they were helping Haiti, despite the fact that they were upholding US imperial machinations, right? Upholding these violent displacement of people, the violent put down of protests against occupation, but also against, complete against workers, against workers' rights, right? The keeping down of wages and so on and so forth. So I think we actually need to think about this in terms of the ideological work that's working, but also the shift, how empire works these days, right? So the US, in terms of, we think about proxy wars, right? Which we're in, there's one right now. The way the US uses the US and the West use other global South nations to carry out its work. So to use Haiti again, the US has this new Monroe Doctrine. It's called the Global Fragilities Act, which is a work between the US State Department, the Department of Defense, and USAID. So it's bringing together the NGO, the Defense Department, and the State Department. And the Global Fragilities Act is basically to deploy colleagues and allies to do the work of the US. And the first two nations that they're implementing it on are Haiti and Libya, the two nations destroyed by the US and NATO. So it's really interesting to think about how, if we don't lay out the political, economic, and ideological framework of the way that empire is dealing with, the loss of power and late capitalism, we cannot actually understand how a place like Haiti has a lot in common with Iraq, with Libya, and how then we wage solidarity that is not a violent solidarity on behalf of imperialism. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jemima. Thank you very much.
Question as well.
Sorry?
Question to Jemima.
The question to you, Jemima, the question was, do you remember? You're on mute.
Yeah, so I see the question. There's lack of solidarity there is a lack of global solidarity because there's an inability to understand Haiti, to understand Haitian circumstances, but also to understand, to not see Haiti as an exceptional case. And I do think it does matter to talk about gender, but it also matters to talk about race. I think there's the very clear notion that this Black country, the stereotypes that come up with Haiti, whenever there's a protest, they say it's gang violence. And so you see images of gangs, you don't see, so even you can have solidarity in Haiti, you don't see the protests on TV. What you see are young men holding guns, right? So there's an inability to think of these Black people as being able to have legitimate protests against cost of living, the declining, their declining life standards, and so on and so forth. And that goes back to 200 years. And that's why I started with Haiti's history, because if you look at the media of the representation of the Haitian Revolution from 200 years ago, it's very similar to the representation of protests now, right? This idea that these are savages that are running around killing each other and killing foreigners. And we cannot get out of that. And that happens, of course, for the African continent, I think, a lot. But I do think there's an inability for people to not exceptionalize Haiti. And the first step that needs to happen is that we cannot exceptionalize Haiti. We actually have to link it to to what's happening in the region, what's happening in the Middle East and Africa. And that's the only way actually we can begin to see it as a normal place where people actually want to live, but also are protesting against this global system that's tearing them down. So there is no solidarity, I don't think, but there can be.
Thank you, Jemima. Mamadou.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jemima, for flagging this issue. So the issue of racism linked to what is happening actually is very important to go through. Just to come back to what Praveen was saying, the economic model has been very instrumental in what is happening actually in the Sahel country particularly. I mentioned it really. This is the very important point. What we see is there is actually an intensification of the extraversion of the economic system all these countries. We have been started by that. Secondly, people have been working on the way of disindustrialization processes in most of the country. We take Mali, for instance, at the independence between 1960 to 1965. Mali was the most industrial country in West Africa with 63 industries owned by the state that are working in different segments, and that was pushing the agricultural sector developing in adding value to all the product. By the 1983 already, we had none. All this has been privatized because on the NAFO adjustment program, and then extraverting. And first they have been bought by some of the companies, international corporations, and then completely left out. And if you look at what the kind of we are raw material providers. Most of these countries are raw material providers. Just to give you examples of the case of Niger, how the labor forces reserve has been growing constantly, and those young people are now joining the terrorist group because of just looking for revenue. And we cannot talk about decent revenue. Niger for 30 years have been, the uranium from Niger has been exploited in the model of exploitation of resources. That was the model. It's not sharing of resources, but exploitation of resources by Areva from France. For 30 years, the total revenue that Niger had is 7%. 7% of the total revenue from uranium that came out from this country. And then it has been used just to strengthen the tightness around Niger, and then contributing also to make collapse all the economic system that this country was planning for its development in the 60s. The case of Mali is also something that needs to be highlighted. If you look at Mali, Mali has been selling in 2019 $3.7 billion of gold in the international market. And then from that, you know what Mali has, just contributing to its economic redistribution, $69 million. Out of the 3.7 billion, Mali has totally, including all taxation system, salaries, and all has been getting is $69 million in total for its investment. So it's not possible. And we have all this green revolution model that was also applied, extraverting the economic system for people to have access to input outside of the continent. Most of the countries have been suffering this year because this war between Russia and Ukraine, most of them were buying chemical fertilizer from that country. So we are even the kind of accumulation that we are having is also extravertial, just buying this kind of input out of the continent and bringing it back. So it brought the situation when we have the constantly growing labor forces reserve, and then these young people have been used by terrorist groups, used by the same channel of international cooperation, and then just to use them as weapons against their own state. So if you look at this economic model, that is really creating condition, and the different players are on the ground actually working on economic partnership agreement between European Union and Africa. All these instruments that have been developed by the US also on the GROW model, and then have been very instrumental in creating this situation. So in most of the country, there is no economic model today. You cannot just flag what is the model that people are having, but international community has a model for these countries and creating this really violent system that we are having actually in the continent. So I will stop here. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
I deeply hope that next year I will be in Harare.
Yes, of course.
Talking about that.
We're missing you here.
Of course. Thank you very much, Mamadou. Sandeep.
So just quick comments. Firstly, in terms of Professor Praveen's observation, you were talking, Paris, of the terminal decay, and how will that terminal decay lead to a quick death or an end? And to me, I think the biggest, and given the structural sort of economic issues, the biggest opportunity to me, as we see it, is the dispossession of working peoples, and a huge dispossession of working peoples. And therefore, the possibility, which is being manifested several places, the possibility of working people, reserve labor coming together. And therefore, that goes to the point Max was raising of what alternate or different forms of organization can we conceive of beyond or in addition to trade unions. Are there such emerging? Are there such formations emerging is the political instrument itself sort of needs re-envisioning as a progressive response. So to me, that is the biggest opportunity out of what you mentioned, Professor. And then, of course, headwinds, the headwinds of nationalism in a regressive way, the question of religion, or the question of new divisions, imperialist divisions that it creates. So I think that's how I tend to think in response to what you said. Now, with reference to what Max was saying, Max, you're right. I stand corrected. I indicated, and there are contradictions in Iran, as you all know, but I was indicating the theocratic inclinations of Iran and the fascist inclinations of India. So perhaps that overlapped. And for sure, there are huge contradictions in both those instances. That is how I would like to respond to the important point you made that Iran has a sort of revolutionary past and has offered international solidarity in the instances that you outlined. In fact, in India, this is the biggest difficulty in going as the Western countries have gone, or as the Northern countries have gone in criticizing Iran. This is a difficulty, despite the kind of state, the kind of government we have. It's very difficult to, not for the reasons that we've been listing, but it's very difficult because it has a South-South past. It has a progressive past or a progressive dimensions to it. And I think it's in this space I'd like to respond to what you raised with reference to my comments on Iran. And I think that's how I would like to respond to what was in the 2 minutes that I had. Thank you.
Well, we made it on time. Yes, excellent time keeping on my part. Yeah, congratulations.
Before anybody else does.
Well, thank you all so much. It's been a great pleasure to have you. Our exchange of ideas has really been profound in these 2 hours that we've had together. We will, I guarantee you that we will have sequels and platforms to carry on this very urgent and crucial debate. So, and we also, of course, hope to see you, all of you, yeah, Max, Jemima, Mamadou, here in Harare next year. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you. Take good care.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.